Because when I go out and do my long exposure seascape photography, many of my exposures are beyond 30 seconds, and also I'm often shooting on bulb mode. And exposure simulation doesn't work beyond 30 seconds, and it doesn't work on bulb mode. But here's the thing, I realize that, of course, a number of my exposures do fall below 30 seconds. And with that, the exposure simulation does offer something that can be very, very useful. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to set it up and use it to assist with your exposures. And in this example, I'm shooting with a neutral density filter. And also, I'm not using a cable release or a remote. And I'll show you the technique I'm using so that the mirror doesn't affect the stability or any camera shake. And if you are curious about exposures beyond 30 seconds, if you want to check out my Seascapes long exposure online course, check out the link in the description. What is exposure simulation? Essentially, it's a live view feature that previews the actual exposure based on your current settings. So as you adjust the shutter speed, as you adjust the aperture or the ISO, it will change in front of you on the screen so that you can see what effect that's having on the actual exposure. Now, it depends on what setting you've actually got it on. We'll cover that very shortly. It has its limitations, but it is potentially very useful. So where do you find it? You've got to be in live preview. That's super important. If you don't have it on live preview, this option will not show. You must have it on live preview, which you do by putting it on the camera icon, obviously, not the video, at the top, and you press in the start stop button, which gives you live preview. Then you press the menu button on the left hand side, and you're looking for the red icon, the camera icon, number 2. And because you've got it on live preview, you'll see the option of exposure simulation. Now you'll be faced with 3 options: enable, disable, or during. With the enable, it means that it's on and it will always be active as long as you've got it on live view. So whether you're adjusting ISO, shutter speed, aperture, or indeed the plus or minus on the exposure, say you're using aperture priority and you're using the plus and minus scale to adjust the exposure, that will also show in live view. Second one is disable, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's simply switched off. Now the third one is interesting. It's entitled during, and what it means is that it's in play, but you only see the effects of it by pressing in the depth of field preview button on the front of the camera. So this way, and the big plus about this is battery saving. So you get a normal screen until you push in the depth of field button on the front of the camera, just below the lens on the but if you're facing towards the back of the camera, it's on the right hand side, generally just at the bottom below the lens. Now the big advantage of that is that it's saving battery. It is a live view is the biggest battery absorption suck of the Canon 90D, as it indeed is with the vast majority of cameras. Live view is a very battery draining thing, and so is this. So the less time that this is on, the more battery life you have. Which modes does this actually work with? And the answer is manual, absolutely. Aperture priority, yes. Shutter speed priority, yes. Program mode, yes, but there is a footnote. There's limitations with it. I'll cover that shortly. Bulb mode, no. If you want to do beyond 30 seconds, which is why you turn to bulb mode, it doesn't apply. You can't use it with exposures longer than 30 seconds. Auto scenes mode, no. Flash mode, no. So they're the things when you're doing your photography, they're the ones you can use it for. The main ones are in manual, aperture priority, and shutter speed priority. So the quick note about the P mode, the program mode, The reason why it's limited with the exposure simulation is that you're not actually controlling the shutter or the aperture directly because it is on program mode. The camera actually does that. It's taken over that. Now, the exposure simulation, it does work as an example. If you're adjusting the ISO, you'll see the difference in the screen. Also, if you're using exposure compensation, that's another way you'll see it in P mode. If you're going up a stop or down a stop, that will be reflected as well. So when does the exposure simulation setting work best? Imagine if you're doing landscape, seascape, and you're composing, and now you're doing the exposure, getting the exposure the way you want it to look. And as I've stressed many times, as long as it's under 30 seconds, over 30 seconds, it doesn't work. This previewing, it can be very powerful, especially to get you to a certain base point, whether you're using an ND filter or not. So the next time you're out in the field doing landscape, seascape, or any particular scene where the idea of being able to preview and see as you adjust shutter, ISO, exposure compensation, aperture, and see the effect of it, and start to use it, get used to it. These things take a little bit of getting used to it to the eye, depending on how bright or what setting you've got on your screen on the back of your camera there. So try it out. Let me know how you get on in the comments below. Would love to know. Just want to add a couple of final points, including about what I mentioned earlier in the video about what to do when you don't have the cable release or remote control. If you don't have a cable release or a remote control and you're concerned that by touching the camera to fire the shutter it could create some sort of movement, now mirror lockup and that is ideal, but even forgetting mirror lockup, you just don't want to, you're happy with the mirror firing up if you've got a DSLR, that's okay, but you still don't want to be necessarily touching the shutter because of vibration. It might be your tripod's a bit not as solid as perhaps it could be, etc. Simply put on 2-second timer, or indeed longer, that's fine as well. But even a 2-second timer will then fire the camera. You just press the back of the camera, or indeed the shutter at the top, and off you go. And that couple of seconds gives the camera time to fully settle before it fires, and therefore that movement is way, way, way less likely to occur. Now, a couple of other tips, by the way, is obviously be aware that with all this previewing, all what you're doing is previewing the exposure. You're certainly not previewing any sort of motion or anything like that. So when you're doing long exposures on anything, like say long exposure with the seascapes, with the preview, you're certainly not getting any sense of what motion blur will be created by a certain exposure. It's purely lightness, brightness. Another thing to do is if you are using ND filters and you're finding the screen just too dark because you might have quite a strong ND filter, and then the light conditions itself certainly affects this as well. So simply take the ND filter off, compose it first, indeed focus without it on, but just be super aware then when you do put it back on not to shift the focus. Very easily done, by the way. Also, you can turn to the histogram in live view for a second confirmation if you like. Get your exposure the way you want it to look. So give this a go. Let me know, as I say in the comments, whether it's useful for the workflow with your photography. And I'll also leave a link in the description for the other YouTube video about mirror lockup if you've been having issues with camera movement, of lack of sharpness when using the tripods. What else? Oh yeah, and also I'll leave the link if you want to know more about my Seascape long exposure online course. I'll leave a link with special offer there for you as well. So have fun with your photography, enjoy your photography, and I'll catch you in the next video.